All right, I wanted to take a quick second and talk to you about the Project 4 Mapping the Conversations essay and give you some helpful tips for how to approach this essay. So this essay needs a couple of elements. First, you need to introduce and give the background and context for your issue and demonstrate its importance. This is going to mostly be what you do in the intro paragraph or intro couple of paragraphs. The next thing you want to do is analyze at least 5 relevant stakeholders while employing stasis theory. So let's talk about stasis theory for a little bit. You've read about stasis theory in the textbook, but here's going to be a quick rundown of stasis theory for your Mapping the Conversations essay. Stasis, as you might think, means common ground. So essentially what you're looking to see is, do the stakeholders have common ground or not? It helps us identify where people agree and disagree. There are 4 purposeful levels of stasis. There's the level of fact, definition, value, and proposal. A different way of saying this is evaluation or policy. There's a couple of different words that you can use for those levels. The idea behind stasis theory is that if someone agrees on the level of fact, then they can also agree on the level of definition, and it moves up and moves up. However, if 2 people disagree on the level of fact, there's no way that they can agree on the level of definition, value, or proposal. And so what we are going to be using to do is to determine where your 5 stakeholders agree and disagree about your issue. What this looks like, if you want to take a screenshot of this screen here, these are some good questions to ask whenever you're looking at each stakeholder. And so when you're looking at a stakeholder on the level of fact, do they agree that this is an issue of concern? Is it something we should care about? Is it something that matters? And then what are the facts held by those who hold opinions on this matter? All right, so this is going to be, what are the facts that are used? Then the level of question of definition. Do people understand and define the topic in the same way? If they don't understand and define in the same way, they're not going to be able to move up on the list. And then you have a question of value or quality. Moral character of the topic or position. How much does it matter? Why is it important to stakeholders? And do you agree that it, on the level that it is really a high issue? Other people don't think twice about it. So they would disagree on the level of value, of how much to value this issue. And then you have the question of policy. This is going to be, if you're interested in politics, you hear a lot of talk about policy. This is what that question essentially means. What do we do about the issue? And this is going to be looking at what the stakeholders think we should do about the issue. This is not going to be your personal opinion about what we should do in the essay. Remember, we are still withholding our opinion on the issue until Project 5. And so let's look at an example of what this looks like with a research question. And my research question is, are standardized test scores the best way to judge a student's academic success? Then I need to look at a couple of different stakeholders. There's a lot of different stakeholders I could look at for this issue. Students, parents, teachers, administrators, legislatures, lobbyists, and testing companies are just a few. So these could be the various stakeholders. Now you only have to pick 5, and at least 4 of those have to be an active stakeholder. So on the level of fact, how do we answer this research question? Well, we need to ask the question, do the stakeholders agree that this is an issue of concern? I would say that most of these stakeholders agree. They want to know the best way to judge a student's academic success. Possibly the only stakeholders that wouldn't care so much if it was the best way might be the testing companies, because they would still be making money whether it was the best way or not. And so you can also ask, can the stakeholders agree on the basic facts? Do they use the same studies, same definition, or same statistics to say if standardized testing is an issue of concern, or if it's the best way to judge a student's academic success? So some of these questions could look like this. After each of these levels, you want to ask the question, what do we learn about the stakeholders' values at this level? And so if you're looking at teachers, if teachers are asking, are standardized tests the best way to judge a student's academic success, then they can ask the question, is it used to judge academic success? Is that what it's actually being used for? Is it used for something else? And then they would also ask, is standardized testing an issue of concern? And their answers to those two questions would inform their values. And so then on the level of definition, we could take this up a little bit. You want to ask the question, how do people understand and define the topic? So some of these questions could sound like this. How do the stakeholders define academic success? Because if you want to know the best way to achieve academic success, you need to know how they're defining it. And then how do the stakeholders define standardized testing? Is the standardized testing the same definition? What do these points reveal about the stakeholders' values? On the next level, we have the question of value or quality. What is the moral character of the topic or position? How important is it? How much should we value it? And so a question like this would sound like this. How much value should be placed on standardized testing? Should it be high stakes or should it be just a benchmark? In what ways do the stakeholders correlate test scores with academic success? And then do stakeholders measure and value success in the same ways? Once we have the answers to those questions, we then ask, what does that reveal about those stakeholders' values? And then finally, we can get to the level of policy. So questions of policies, what do we do about it? So some of the questions you could ask of your stakeholders is, what do the stakeholders think about what we should do about standardized testing? How much time and money should be spent on testing? How should testing determine student success? And then what they think we should do about it, what does that reveal about their values? The most important thing to note about the most important thing to note about stasis theory is that it has to operate sequentially. So if you have two stakeholders who disagree on a level of fact, then equals no stasis. However, if you have two stakeholders who have been discussion of terms, then they would have stasis on the level of definition to use in your stakeholder paragraphs. I want to take a second and look at an example paragraph. Here we go. To see how they use this language of stasis theory in their stakeholder section. Perhaps the most well-known voice in this argument is that of AI. There, on the topic sentence, immediately we know which stakeholder in this paragraph. To be frank, the field of AI is rather large with numerous subfields which are independent of one another. With this in mind, the most common areas of research for AI are knowledge representation, machine learning, natural language processing, software agents, intelligent tutoring systems, and robotics. We have the source that shows how they figured out all these fields of AI. This group seeks to create, so the AI scientists and inventors, this group seeks to create new technologies that both benefit society and individuals for the greater good. This idea of value-driven progress is where other groups would most likely agree with scientists and inventors. So the other groups would agree. We're talking levels of stasis here. Those other groups, such as professionals and consumers, would want AI that are a benefit to their respective fields. AI would improve productivity while also limiting total manpower. However, the greater good may act as a mask for some scientists to acquire wealth and fame strictly for selfish reasons. Scientists and inventors tend to argue that the fundamental goal of AI research is not merely to mimic intelligence or produce some clever fake. AI wants only the genuine article, machines with minds in the full and literal sense. Of course, this is where AI scientists and inventors become divided. Some scientists believe that AI cannot think in the same literal sense as human beings, while others argue that thinking is comparable to a machine's computing. So we see that there can be some disagreement within the individual stakeholder as well. Some scientists believe that it cannot think, while others think that thinking is comparable to computing. make matters worse, this can also be seen as the point where this group becomes estranged from consumers. So again, we see where they disagree, and the public as a whole. Scientists will argue using facts and logic, while the public oftentimes has different viewpoints concerning value and policy. And so you can see in this paragraph, we have the topic sentence where it introduces the stakeholder that's going to be discussed, AI scientists and inventors. We have the section that talks about the values that they hold, the level of stasis within this group. And then we also see where there's levels of disagreement with other groups, how it interacts with other groups. And so what this can look like for you as you're planning your paper, think about it in terms of a grid. So you can have a grid that looks at levels of definition, value or evaluation, and policy. So on this grid, you're going to put your different stakeholders, all 5 of them, and you're going to think in terms of what are the facts that each stakeholder is using, what are the definitions they're using, what are the values and the policies they're suggesting. You might need to use multiple sources to figure out what the fact of one stakeholder is, or what the value of one stakeholder is. All sources might not have all these things. This is why it's important to be well researched and have multiple sources for each stakeholder. So for your first stakeholder, you've already done this research. You wrote your annotated bid. Annotated bid looked at 3 different sources. Looked at 3 different sources. Able to hear from your sources that you gathered the facts are, is that they're using, value, and policy. And so you can fill in these blanks. But then use this to craft your first section. So stakeholder section 1. So for your stakeholder section, you're going to look and you're going to review what are the facts, definition, value, and policy. This paper is piecemeal, bit by bit, so that you're not having to do it all at one time. I do want to go back to the assignment guidelines really quick so that we can look at what each stakeholder section needs. So it makes it clear for each stakeholder, you should identify who they are, their relationship to the issue, and where possible, what they are arguing and the values that connect to that position. And so whenever we go back to our outline here, our first stakeholder section should tell us who they are. And this can be as simple as a topic sentence, like we saw in this paragraph here. It tells us who they are. Specifically, it goes further to define who all is encompassed in AI scientists and inventors. So there are areas of AI for knowledge, representation, heuristics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this kind of defines more who the AI scientists and inventors are. And then we want to make sure we talk about their relationship to the issue. How are they connected to this issue? So if we go back here, we can ask, what is their relationship to the issue? And then last but not least, we want to ask, what are they arguing and what are the values that connect their positions? And so we want to go back to our, what are they arguing? It's when you get to this, what are they arguing, that you're going to employ stasis theory. Now, you cannot have stasis theory within one section. Well, I say that. Some stakeholders, if you're looking at a group of people, might disagree even within the stakeholder themselves. And so you can say that there is not stasis even within the stakeholder section, not stasis within stakeholders. So looking at our example of standardized testing, some parents might agree that standardized test is the best way to determine academic success, while others may not. And so the group of parents would be divided. Therefore, there would not be stasis within the stakeholder section, right? However, some stakeholders are going to agree. And so you can say there is stasis in the level of definition, but they lose stasis with other stakeholders on different levels. You do not have to go through each level, fact, definition, value, policy within your paragraph. You need to identify, though, where they agree and where they disagree. So say our stakeholder 1 and stakeholder 2 agree on levels of fact and definition, disagree on levels of value. So all you would need to point out is between stakeholder 1 and stakeholder 2, they lose stasis on the evaluation level. And that is where you would talk about why they lose status, why they lose stasis, why lose stasis, and what does this reveal about their values. If you feel confused about stasis theory, I want to say again that that is okay. This is the hardest topic that we talk about this semester. So please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Refer to the textbook. It is a great resource for talking about stasis theory.